The PC release of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is doing incredibly well. That is, according to Matt Piscatella, an industry analyst who says here on his Blue Sky account, quote, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth had a fantastic Steam launch, across physical and track-to-digital. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was the best-selling game of the week, ending January 25th in the US market, dollar sales, while the Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth Twin Pack ranked 3rd. Source Circana Retail Tracking Service. This gives a very strong case for Square Enix putting these games on PC. Because as good as this game is selling on PC a year later, imagine how good this game would have sold if it was available on PC day one. It would have been seeing way more impressive numbers than it is now. If you release a game while its marketing is at the highest point, it is always going to do much better on all platforms than if you try to go back and release it later. This is just because the excitement to play the game, the excitement to go and engage with it, the social media buzz, the virality of it, is happening most strongly, wouldn't you figure it, when the game first releases. And so it is good to hear that Square Enix is going to be relieving themselves of the PlayStation exclusivity, and that there is a strong likelihood that Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 is going to be releasing on all platforms, at least PlayStation 5 and PC day one. And a look at the concurrent players on Steam shows that gamers aren't just buying Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, they are actively playing with it and engaging with it. So of course the peak concurrence is still at 40,000, which again is the highest number for any single player Final Fantasy release ever. That in itself is huge. But what really showed me that this game is a banger on PC is that even on the second weekend after this game has been out, we still hit around 36,000 concurrent players. To give you an idea of how nutty that is compared to the rest of Final Fantasy games that have released on Steam, it essentially beat Final Fantasy 15 and Final Fantasy 16's peak concurrent players twice now, both on the first weekend and the second weekend, getting more than their lifetime concurrent players. That alone is huge, but the game is really sustaining its player count. Now, I know this isn't necessarily the best metric to use for single player games, and single player games eventually do fall off of these charts. This does show a pretty valuable thing. People are continuing to buy the game, and people are continuing to play the game. This all bodes really well for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and is a W for the brand that has been desperately needed. And also, yet again, shows that a day one release for the next major FF is not optional. It has to be there. It has to be on Steam. Keeping this momentum going is really important. Again, it's really hard to just outright estimate how many units have been sold. Now, we do have an owner estimation here, and it's anywhere between like 300,000 and 600,000. These owner estimations are only a really rough ballpark and not necessarily like the end-all be-all sales estimate. However, PC games tend to have legs. They tend to sell long-term. People continuously buy games throughout a game's life on PC, especially thanks to Steam sales, and as time goes on, more and more people pick up the game. And so if we're assuming that it's somewhere in the middle here of like 400,000 or 500,000 units, it makes me think that we're looking at probably 1 million to 1.5 million in like the near future. And maybe if I was to be really optimistic, we'd be looking at 2 million lifetime. That is really not too bad. But again, for a game that's being re-released from PS5 to PC, those are fairly solid numbers. And again, that's not just according to me, that's according to an actual industry analyst. Of course, if you haven't already, you can pick up a code for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth on Steam thanks to our sponsor Instant Gaming. They have the game for only $39 right now, which is an incredible deal. So if you haven't picked up Rebirth already, I highly recommend doing that with a link in the pinned comment and description below. And also guys, they allow us to give away a free game every month. Literally, all you have to do is click the participate button and you're entered to win. So I highly recommend doing it, and you can join these lovely folks here who have already won their free game thanks to Instant Gaming. Sorry if the lighting looks a bit different here and I've changed clothes, but there were also some more tweets that I wanted to include in this section of the video. So I needed to record a little bit more and I saw them at a later time, but I actually find this really fascinating and I think it's important to include in the video. So one really important thing that Alex Donaldson Donaldson had said here is, quote, "This smashed all of their expectations and projections for this fiscal year." So from launch through end of March, by the way. One thing is clear, the next game really needs to launch on PC, and ideally, if at all possible, everything, Xbox and Switch 2 as well. This is what the series needs to thrive. He then continues by saying, "I think this specific SKU of this specific game is the first time an FF launch has exceeded internal expectations / projections since 15, except possibly a 14 expansion, because I don't follow or gossip about those nearly as closely. Final Fantasy games have not had the words exceeding expectations following them in a really long time." Again, I believe that Alex is correct here. The last time that we've seen any FF game exceeding expectations was probably 15, aside from 14 expansion packs. If this isn't a sign that Part 3 needs to be on PC to thrive, then absolutely nothing is. It also just shows you how well Rebirth could have done if it had simultaneously launched on PC and PS5. Another really important thing too is that whatever they were thinking this game was going to sell through to March, it is already sold. So within the first 2 weeks, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth has already hit like the first quarter sales expectations. Well, I do think this brand has a lot more issues than just exclusivity. I do think the most immediate thing they can do is put this game out for all platforms. And this huge success here exemplifies that. Now, Jason Schreier also had some things to say about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth PC's fantastic launch. Him saying, quote, "Two takeaways here. Steam has become a bright spot for many game makers as console sales have flattened. Console exclusives will become obsolete soon, especially for third-party publishers." Okay, I feel like half of the comments on this video are going to end up being about this statement from Schreier. "I am openly a PC fanboy. I definitely don't hide it. That is where I prefer to game." You do have Sony putting games out for PC now. Microsoft has been putting games out for PC since forever. And the only one who will not put games out for PC, obviously, is Nintendo. But every other company, third party or first party, is going to release their games on PC. What I do find funny, though, is that you will have a lot of people deep within the PlayStation fandom kind of say, well, people don't want a game on PC. Consoles are just more accessible. And so I'll always choose to game on a console. And I think that's entirely fair. But then a lot of those same people would then insist that the value of the PS brand is being devalued by these games releasing on PC. Because why would people buy a PlayStation when they could just play the game on PC? I find these statements hard to reconcile. Sure, I suppose they don't have to be mutually exclusive, but I feel like in most cases they are, right? Like either most people do prefer to game on a console and they don't want to game on a PC, or releasing it on PC, there's a significant number of people who do prefer or wouldn't mind playing the game on PC, and thus, as a result, don't mind buying the games on PC and wouldn't buy a PlayStation. So which one is it? There's also been a large number of games that do release on PC day one have had a large amount of success on PC. Resident Evil games, huge on PC. Elden Ring, massive on PC. 2023's Game of the Year, Baldur's Gate 3. Literally a CRPG, with the vast majority of its sales coming from PC, and it overwhelmingly being played on PC. So let me be clear on this before you go and smash the dislike button. I am not saying, and I don't even think Jason Schreier here is saying, that consoles are going to go away. But console exclusivity, on the other hand, permanently might be a thing of the past outside of Nintendo, and there's an argument that that's already a thing. We could make a whole video talking about this exact thing. In fact, we could do a whole stream elaborating on this for hours. But I think the point here is that people who like to game on console are going to continue to game on console, and people who like to game on PC are going to continue to game on PC, and consoles and PCs are probably not the threat to each other that normally think of them as, and more than likely consoles and PCs can actually coexist and continue to sell games, and people will continue to game on their preferred console, and people who like to play on PC can game on their PC, and the need for exclusivity probably isn't quite there, at least not in the way that it used to be. But that is definitely not all for the news today. We also have some fairly shocking news. So right here from Shinra Archaeology Department, quote, "The PC files for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, much like Remake, have lines in the Japanese text not in the final version of the game. For example, here's some from the party when Cloud pushes through the whispers and raises his sword above Aerith." So let's go ahead and take a look at the text here. So it starts off with Aerith saying, saying, "Planet and its faithful stewards, please lend me your strength." And then Red 13 says, "Don't let them win." Kate Sis says, "Fight, Cloud." Yuffie says, "Come on, get up." And then Aerith comes back and says, "I know I'm doing this wrong. Mom never taught me how to pray, and as the last living Cetra, I may never learn." Tifa and Barrett saying, "Cloud, what the hell are you doing?" And then Aerith coming back with more dialogue saying, "All I want is one thing, to keep others safe. They mean so much to me. So please, tell me how to do that. I'm begging you." Cloud then shouts no, or in the Japanese, he says Sephiroth's name here, draws sword with a burst of willpower, and then Aerith says, "Thank you," followed by Sephiroth saying, "Don't weep. Your tears are empty, just like you." But honestly, it's this bit of dialogue right here where things get interesting for me. Barrett makes mention about the alternate worlds. For those who have copium about there being alternate worlds, this may not be too much of a fun time for you. So here's what was said in the cut dialogue. "Any sign? Red 13, maybe the whispers got him. You think they took him somewhere? Oh yeah, wasn't that butthole saying something about alternate worlds?" Then Tifa shouts, "Look out, it's Sephiroth." And then Barrett says, "This one's for Aerith, time to get revenge," is the literal translation here. So there was this scene right here that Subtext had shared that this was a reference to, and it really makes perfect sense as it fits perfectly right here. So I want us to watch this together, as it really does show how much, no pun intended, subtext there is to a lot of the dialogue in Re-Trilogy.
Must have been some dream you were having, judging by the way your eyes were twitching.
Don't know if I'd call it a dream.
Either way, something happened to you, didn't it?
Yeah. Got sent to another world. Apparently, there's at least a few more than one.
Is that right?
I'd explain, but don't think I can.
It's alright. Doubt I'd want to hear it anyway.
So yeah, as you can see, there's a lot of stuff pointing to multiple worlds, alternative worlds, whether you want to see all those things as worlds within the live stream, whether you look at those things as multiple timelines, however you want to perceive it, however you want to reconcile it, it does indeed seem that there is something going on where there is more than just one plane of reality or existence. And I do not think that all of this is just happening in Cloud's head. I think that at this point, that's like one of the weakest points of discussion that we have so far. Next, we also have evidence from these cut lines of dialogue that Cid and Vincent were going to help out during the Sephiroth Reborn fight. And I do feel like this cut is really unfortunate. It's understandable, but I feel like it probably should have happened. Now, their battle animations and battle data probably was not finished, and that is probably the biggest reason why this didn't happen. That's just my speculation on it. Don't take that as the ultimate truth. However, that just seems like a very reasonable guess on why they wouldn't be there, especially when they had plans to implement it. So the dialogue here says, Barrett, yeah, you feel that? Whoa, 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 whoa. Vincent saying, here he comes. Ketchi saying he's rebuilding himself. Then we keep fighting. This one I don't think we need to read through all the dialogue, but Tifa has a line at the spring where she says Aerith's name, and that's essentially cut from the final game. That being said, I do think that their friendship developed in a really meaningful and great way in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and seeing Tifa going through that grieving process really enhances both her character and Aerith's, in my opinion. This is the part that changes everything that we know about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and all of our theories and everything that we've been saying. This is the thing that I think that we need to hyper fixate on. I don't think that they necessarily changed the story here or changed what's going to happen. I think that they've only changed the fact that they've decided to hide this one detail, and we're going to know about it later at some point. Cid can actually see the rift in the sky at the end of the game. So it's not just Cloud. The idea that all of this is in Cloud's head or something like that, it's not, because now other people are seeing it, and Cid, of course, is among them. So let's go ahead and take a look at the dialogue here. Cloud saying, the reunion. Cid saying, hey, you coming or what? Yeah, 1 second. Tifa, so where do we go from here? Let's head north. That's where Sephiroth is. And then Aerith says, you okay? Yeah, used to it by now. The hell's that? Look at this guy. And then Aerith is like, no, you promised not to look up. Or what she says in Japanese, which is literally, Sora wa minaide, don't look at the sky. And excuse my terrible American accent. So if I had to theorize on what's going on here, is that eventually at some point, everyone is going to see the sky. This might be a corny hypothesis on why the first person to notice it is Cid, but it's literally the only thing I can think of. Maybe because, you know, Cid's a pilot and he has a connection to the sky, so he notices like the vibes in the sky, so he's the first one to like really pick up on it. I know that's not a very satisfying lore answer, and maybe that's why they removed it. Maybe they thought that seemed kind of weird. We know from the final game that Barrett doesn't notice it and no one else seems to like really notice it, and they make Cloud basically feel weird. Like Cloud looked crazy because he's like, yeah, the sky is like freaking out right now, don't look at it. Nobody else sees it though, right? Again, you know, maybe there is some connection with Sid in the sky, but like if I had to take a guess on, you know, who was going to see it first, my guess would have been either Nanaki or Tifa. Nanaki because, you know, after Aerith, he's the one that's most connected to the planet, and then Tifa being next in line because after her kind of having her, you know, spiritual awakening inside of the planet in chapter 9 of the main game, I feel as though she has some sort of connection to the planet now. That and her deeper relationship with Aerith in this remake may have given her some kind of intuition. So it is really interesting that Sid was their choice for who is able to see what was going on in the sky. Whether that remains the case in the third part of Re-Trilogy, because again, they did cut this out for a reason, whether that's them deciding at the last minute, nah, we don't want Sid to be the first one to like really notice it. They wanted to redo the scene in order to not give too much away. There's a ton of reasons why this could have been done, but I do think it confirms the idea that it's all in Cloud's head is probably not the case. Not that that was ever really the theory necessarily in my opinion, but it has been one that's been out there. Lastly, I want to cover this one right here. The Japanese text in the PC files for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth also shows that Glenn would have originally turned into President Shinra instead of Sephiroth. Personally, this is one I kind of think that they should have kept the way it was, because I think Glenn transforming into President Shinra would have been like a better scene for me personally. That to me would have resonated a lot more than him turning into Sephiroth. So let's take a look at the dialogue here. I had a feeling I was being called. What a coincidence. I had a feeling you'd come. You know anything about this Viceroy Saruf? He failed to show at an important event. Left us in quite the pickle. Rufus. Important event? Hard to blame him. Who'd want to stand around in that dump of a press room? Sorry my best wasn't enough. Still, the war drums are beating louder by the minute. I'd say our little stunt was effective. I'm glad you're laughing, because I'm furious. So you finally caught on. And at this point, it seems like he transforms into President Shinra, with it saying, President, how long until we locate the Promised Land? We mustn't hesitate to do all we can. Rejoice, my dear Rufus. What need is there to search for the Promised Land? We can create it with our own hands. Your childhood dream is about to come true. Rufus then saying, I want the real thing, not some imitation. And Glenn concluding the scene saying, you know what they say about counting your blessings. So this is really interesting. I prefer this scene right here and the way this dialogue plays out and with him turning into President Shinra over the final scene with him turning into Sephiroth. I just think that this resonates a little bit more for me in how I perceive Rufus's character arc and what would have enhanced it for me. But I'm actually still very curious on this thread here with Glenn and Rufus, or Glenn Novaroff, and what is going on here. So this is something I'm really excited to see them expand upon in part 3. But guys, I have to know what you think on all of this and all these changes that have been made throughout development. Of course, there's probably even more changes than this. That's just the nature of game development, but this is what we found that was still located in the PC Games files. A lot of interesting changes to scenes. A lot of it lets us know certain things that might still be canon in a way, but ultimately, I am really excited to hear some of your thoughts on this, some of your preferences if you preferred the way these scenes originally played out, or if you preferred what we got in the final game. So be sure to check out Instant Gaming, and I will see you all in the next video. Later, guys.